Uh, and okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Kenny Wu, and I am the program coordinator here at Walker CTSC. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on our presentation on precision medicine. Today, we're joined by Maisa Trapilsi and Natalie Helmers from the Department of Neurology at Walker Medicine. This presentation will be done in English and Spanish. If you want to ask any questions or you want to talk to the presenters, there's a chat function at the bottom of the screen. You can type in the question while the presentation is going, and the presenters will be able to answer it during the Q&A section of the presentation. At the end, we'll also have a short poll. It's going to be anonymous, and please fill it out if possible, okay? Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Kenny Wu, y yo soy el coordinador de programas en Walker CTSC. Muchas gracias a todos ustedes por atender a nuestra presentación el día de hoy. El día de hoy vamos a tener una presentación sobre la medicina de precisión. La presentación va a ser en inglés y español. Si tienen preguntas, en la parte de abajo hay una sección donde nos pueden enviar un chat, un mensaje. Las presentadoras del día de hoy son Maisa Trapilsi y Natalie Helmers del Departamento de Neurología de Walker Medicine. Al final, vamos a tener una encuesta que va a ser anónima sobre la presentación. Por favor, llénenla si pueden.
Thank you so much, Kenny, for starting us off. So this is our second presentation with the CTSC, and our first one can be found on YouTube. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces and many new ones as well. So our session will be recorded. Please listen as we go through our slides, and all our questions will be addressed at the end. As Kenny mentioned, you can share questions at the end by speaker or by the chat feature as well. For those of you who are listening in by telephone, of course, by speaker. It's hard to believe it's September on this really hot and muggy day. I hope everybody's doing well.
Bienvenidos. Esta es nuestra segunda presentación con Walker CTSC. Ustedes pueden encontrar nuestra primera presentación en nuestra página de YouTube. Esta presentación va a ser grabada. Ustedes nos pueden hacer preguntas al final de la presentación usando la función de chat.
Just to formally introduce myself, my name is Natalie Helmers. I'm a nurse practitioner here at Weill Cornell Medicine. And a fun fact to share about me as we are approaching October is that Halloween is my absolute favorite holiday. And Mesa, go ahead, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. My name is Maisa Trapilsi. I am a research coordinator that works with Natalie in the neurology department. I aspire to be a doctor. And a fun fact about me is that my favorite TV show is The Office.
Conozcan a sus presentadores del día de hoy. Natalie Helmers es enfermera practicante y su fiesta favorita es Halloween. También Maisa Trapilsi es la coordinadora de investigación en el Departamento de Neurología en Walker Medicine. Es aspirante a estudiar una carrera en medicina y su programa de televisión favorita es The Office.
Kenny, thank you. I snuck in that extra sentence, which I took the liberty to translate myself.
That's okay. That's okay.
I promise that was it. There are no more surprises. So our objectives for today's presentation. Number one, to begin our discussion, we will go over what is Parkinson's disease. For number two, we will discuss what is precision medicine. Third, we'll define the factors that comprise precision medicine, including the genetic, biological, social, and environmental. We'll discuss what this means for maintaining a healthy lifestyle with Parkinson's disease, and also discuss the precision medicine clinical trials here at Weill Cornell Medicine.
Los objetivos del día de hoy. Primero vamos a hacer un resumen, qué es la enfermedad de Parkinson. Luego vamos a ver qué es la medicina de precisión. Vamos a definir los factores en la medicina de precisión como los factores genéticos, biológicos, sociales y ambientales. También vamos a dar ejemplos para un estilo de vida saludable con personas que tienen Parkinson. Y vamos a tener una discusión de los estudios clínicos de medicina de precisión en Weill Cornell Medicine.
So for our general overview of Parkinson's disease, it is a progressive nervous system disorder that leads to both motor, or the movement, and non-motor symptoms. So throughout this presentation, you'll keep hearing that reference back to motor and non-motor symptoms. And of course, we have to reintroduce Michael J. Fox here, our leader in promoting research for Parkinson's disease. And a quote, "Optimism is a cure for many things." And I agree with that.
Primero vamos a dar una visión general de la enfermedad de Parkinson. La enfermedad de Parkinson es una enfermedad progresiva del sistema nervioso con síntomas motores o síntomas de movimiento y no motores, ¿no? Los síntomas comienzan gradualmente y generalmente como un temblor y empeoran con el tiempo. La parte de abajo, el optimismo es una cura para muchas cosas.
So to really begin our talk today, looking at the possible causes of the disease, which is where the precision medicine aspect comes in. And so we know that with Parkinson's disease, neurons in the brain gradually break down or die, and many symptoms are due to a loss of neurons that produce a chemical messenger in our brains called dopamine. And when dopamine levels decrease, this causes an abnormal brain activity leading to symptoms of Parkinson's. And here we have that image of the brain, and very deep. This is not a superficial area, region of the brain that we're talking about. It's the deep midbrain, which you can see on the slide here.
¿Cuáles son las posibles causas de la enfermedad de Parkinson? En la enfermedad de Parkinson, las neuronas en el cerebro se descomponen o mueren gradualmente. Muchos de los síntomas se deben a una pérdida de neuronas que producen neurotransmisores llamados dopamina en el cerebro. Cuando los niveles de dopamina se disminuyen, esto causa una actividad cerebral anormal que en torno causa síntomas de la enfermedad de Parkinson. Aquí hay una imagen del cerebro en la parte central del cerebro.
To this day, we hypothesize that there are possible causes of this disease, and several factors appear to play a role. For example, your genes, your age, and your sex. We know there are environmental triggers, for example, toxins, and these causes can lead to the deposition of abnormal amounts of a normally produced protein called alpha-synuclein in the brain. And we'll talk a little bit more about this complex protein called alpha-synuclein.
¿Y cuáles son las posibles causas de la enfermedad? Presentemente no sabemos las causas, pero varios factores deben ser considerados, como por ejemplo tus genes, edad, sexo, y también hay desencadenantes ambientales como toxinas. Estas causas pueden conducir al depósito de cantidades anormales de una proteína producida normalmente en el cerebro llamado alfa-sinucleína. Luego vamos a hablar un poquito más sobre la proteína.
And to review some of our motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease, right? So our three main motor symptoms are tremor, which we refer to as an involuntary movement, bradykinesia, which we refer to as slowed movement, and then rigidity, where muscles become stiff and actual movements become stiff. And some of you may be rather familiar with this information, but it's always good to remind ourselves of this terminology. When we look at the image to our right, we see the other cardinal signs, right? So we can see a stooped posture, in some instances, a masked face or a poker face. There can be the reduced arm swing. There can be a reduced kind of leg movements, or even movements where the legs become a little bit flexed. And we can see shuffling, right? If you look at the bottom of that image, where the steps can become short, or we see a kind of a stepped gait, which can be very troublesome to people. And tremors can actually exist anywhere in the body. While quite frequently it's in the hands, for some people it only exists in the legs.
¿Cuáles son los síntomas motores de la enfermedad? Los más comunes: temblor, movimiento involuntario, bradicinesia, lentitud con disminución de amplitud de movimiento, músculos rígidos y complicaciones motoras. En la imagen podemos ver que tienen temblor en las manos, temblor en las piernas, también tienen lo que es el movimiento del brazo es reducido.
And now moving on to the non-motor symptoms. So again, non-motor, it's the symptoms that refer to things such as constipation, insomnia, REM sleep behavior disorder, a loss of sense of smell, anxiety, depression, and other complicated mood changes, as well as excessive saliva. And this is just a summary. There are more. Perhaps other symptoms come to mind, but generally these are the most common of the non-motor symptoms.
¿Y cuáles son los síntomas no motores del Parkinson? Como por ejemplo la constipación, el insomnio, trastorno de comportamiento de sueño REM, pérdida de sentido del olfato, ansiedad, depresión, cambios de humor y producción de saliva excesiva.
There are 5 stages of Parkinson's disease, starting from mild to severe. And this is a common question that I find comes up in the clinic when I'm talking to patients. You know, what stage am I and what does it mean? And, you know, clinically, we don't necessarily use this, but in research, it does become important, especially when we think about the inclusion or exclusion criteria of who may be the right fit for a certain clinical trial, right? So just to review, we have stage 1 through 5, that's seen in this circle here. And in stage 1, really the symptoms are minimal and they're unilateral, which means that they occur only on one side. Stage 2, we see both sides. So if there's a tremor on the left, there now may be a tremor on the right. Stage 3, we see balance becoming affected. In stage 4, a person now starts to need help with activities of daily living, such as getting dressed, completing tasks, the everyday daily life tasks. And then stage 5, we see the symptoms are really at their most severe.
Generalmente hay 5 etapas de la enfermedad de Parkinson, desde la más leve hasta la más grave. Aunque la enfermedad de Parkinson no se puede curar, los medicamentos pueden mejorar significativamente sus síntomas motores. Ocasionalmente, su neurólogo puede sugerir hacerse una cirugía para los movimientos anormales. La primera etapa son síntomas mínimos unilaterales. La segunda etapa, los 2 lados del cuerpo son afectados. La tercera etapa, el equilibrio es afectado. En la cuarta etapa, las personas necesitan ayuda con actividades cotidianas o actividades del día a día. Y la quinta etapa son síntomas graves.
What is good to know is that two scales are used to measure Parkinson's disease, and actually we do use this clinically. There's the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, or the UPDRS. So patients that are familiar at the Weill Cornell Medicine Clinic will probably recognize this. It's the finger taps and the hand movements that we ask you to do. And the Movement Disorder Society Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, the MDS UPDRS, is actually similar, although it's rated a little bit differently. So just keep in mind that there are two scales that are being used.
Hay dos escalas usadas para evaluar la enfermedad de Parkinson. La escala unificada de calificación de la enfermedad de Parkinson, UPDRS por sus siglas en inglés, o la escala unificada de calificación de la enfermedad de Parkinson de la Sociedad del Trastorno de Movimiento. Las escalas son un poco diferentes, pero muy similares.
And then when we talk about the diagnosis of the disease, right, it's still a clinical diagnosis. We base everything on medical history, signs and symptoms, a neurological and physical exam when a person comes into the clinic to be diagnosed, and or imaging, specifically when symptoms are a little bit unclear, because we know that there are other neurological conditions that exist out there. There are actually quite a number of neurological diseases in general, and some of them can mimic Parkinson's. And so when the clinical symptoms are not as clear, that's oftentimes when imaging comes into play. So again, if you have had an MRI or another type of scan, or if you haven't, that may or may not be unusual. And it's important to keep in mind that regardless, even with some of the greatest clinics that exist out there throughout the globe, it still may take some time to diagnose this disease. And that can be very frustrating to some people, when they're sort of volleying back and forth. Do I have Parkinson's? Do I not have Parkinson's? And you may hear the phrase, it just may take some time to better present itself.
¿Y cómo diagnosticamos la enfermedad? El diagnóstico clínico se basa en un historial médico, signos y síntomas. Aparte, se da un examen neurológico, físico y un diagnóstico por imágenes. ¿Por qué se hace un diagnóstico por imágenes? Porque hay muchas enfermedades que son similares al Parkinson y para asegurarse hacen el diagnóstico por imágenes, ¿no? Diagnosticar esta enfermedad puede tomar tiempo.
And when we talk about treatment of disease, we think of course, number one, medications, and many medications that currently exist. And interestingly, even in the past year, more have been approved. The gold standard is our carbidopa-levodopa, and the many variations of this one that exists. We have our dopamine agonists, we have our MAO-B inhibitors, and we also have amantadine. And now amantadine also exists in 2 other formulations. When medications don't work as well as we would like, or if there are many side effects that a person is experiencing, a surgical procedure might be the road to take. And one of them, which some of you have certainly heard about, is deep brain stimulation. And there is exercise and diet, which is the part of our lifestyle component, really a priority for good health. And as a kind of adjunct to all of this, there are clinical trials, and this is where we come in. So it's in addition to therapeutic and interventional clinical trials currently running, we do have 2 major precision medicine trials here at Weill Cornell.
¿Y cuáles son los tratamientos para la enfermedad de Parkinson? Medicamentos como la carbidopa-levodopa, agonista de dopamina inhibidores de MAO-B, la mantadina. Aparte de eso, también hay cirugías como la DBS y, claro, ¿no? El cambio de estilo de vida y en hogar, ejercicios aeróbicos, la comida, cambian la comida. Y aquí, para lo que estamos el día de hoy, estudios clínicos también.
All right, so thanks Natalie for giving us a quick overall overview of Parkinson's disease. I'm going to jump into research a little bit more. So what are clinical trials? Clinical trials are scientific studies conducted to find better ways to prevent, screen for, diagnose, or treat disease. They produce data for future healthcare decision making. Next slide, please.
Entonces, también hay investigaciones en el área de las enfermedades neurodegenerativas, que son los ensayos clínicos o los estudios clínicos, ¿no? Los ensayos clínicos son estudios científicos realizados para encontrar mejores formas de prevenir, detectar, diagnosticar o tratar enfermedades. Esos producen datos o data para las decisiones de atención médica en el futuro.
All right, so what are we doing at Cornell? So at the Movement Disorders Clinic, we have multiple clinical trials running focused on all stages of Parkinson's disease. In this particular presentation, we're going to be focusing on the two major precision medicine protocols. And at the very bottom of the slide is the location of our clinic. That's 428 East 72nd Street, Suite 400, New York, New York, 10021. All right, next slide, please.
¿Qué estamos haciendo el día de hoy? En la clínica de trastorno de movimientos, aquí en Weill Cornell Medicine, tenemos múltiples estudios o ensayos clínicos en ejecución, enfocados en todas las etapas de la enfermedad de Parkinson y medicina de precisión. En la parte de abajo, el lugar de nuestra clínica, ¿no?
Okay, so we're going to jump in and talk about what exactly is precision medicine. So it follows the notion that one size does not fit all. So according to Midline Press, precision medicine is a long-term research endeavor involving the National Institutes of Health and multiple other research centers that aims to understand how various aspects of a person's life can determine the best targeted approach to prevent and treat disease. So true precision medicine involves the use of data that focuses on genetics. All right, next slide, please.
¿Y qué es la medicina de precisión o la medicina personalizada? La medicina personalizada sigue la noción de que una talla no sirve para todos. Según Medline Plus, la medicina de precisión es un esfuerzo de investigación a largo plazo que involucra al Instituto Nacional de Salud, NIH por sus siglas en inglés, y muchos de otros centros de investigación. Tiene como objetivo comprender cómo varios aspectos de la vida de una persona pueden determinar el mejor enfoque dirigido para prevenir o tratar enfermedades. La medicina de precisión verdadera implica el uso de datos genómicos, el código genómico de un individuo o el ADN.
All right, so some history. Precision medicine was included in Barack Obama's 2016 budget called the Precision Medicine Initiative. And I think here is Natalie's going to jump in with her data facts as well.
Un poquito de historias de medicina de precisión. La medicina de precisión fue incluida en el presupuesto de 2016 de Barack Obama, denominada Iniciativa de Medicina de Precisión.
Thank you, Mesa and Kenny. So to segue from that, right, when we talk about what entails a precision medicine approach, we have our genetics, genomics, the biological aspect, and the social and environmental. But the data fact, right, that's really important here. While we are talking about these three major aspects of precision medicine, and I'd really like you all to think about this like the meat and potatoes of precision medicine right here on this slide. What's most important, right, that the plate that's carrying these potatoes and meat is basically big data, or our data that's gathered in our electronic health record is stored and is analyzed. So while we're not focusing on technology and data today, because that's really a whole other avenue of precision medicine, but a really important one, and what many campuses throughout the United States are doing following the national budget toward precision medicine, including Weill Cornell Medicine. However, maybe we can tailor this for another presentation with our CTSC down the line. So food for thought.
¿Y cuáles son los componentes de la medicina de precisión? Los componentes, los más importantes, son componentes genéticos, genómicos, biológicos, sociales y ambientales.
So to keep in mind here, as a genetic component of precision medicine, what exactly is genomics? And I hope after you leave this presentation today, you'll feel a little bit smarter with some of these words that we are going through today. So a genome is an organism's complete set of genetic material. It's DNA. And genomics is the study of these materials.
Primero vamos a hablar sobre el componente genético de la medicina de precisión. ¿Qué es la genómica, no? El genoma es el conjunto completo de material genético de un organismo, su ADN. La genómica es el estudio de estos materiales.
Genetic components of precision medicine. You have to think about, what do targeted therapeutics usually include? So there's genetic sequencing, which is determining the order of the building block of DNA. Next generation sequencing, where instead of sequencing an individual's entire genetic code from scratch every single time, this technique will sequence fragments of an arm of an individual's DNA, and then use algorithms to compare the results to a DNA library to fill in the gaps, right? So remember, I mentioned big data, and that's where big data comes in to use this information. And there's just tons and tons and tons of DNA information that gets built up over time. A very interesting gene editing technology that you may have heard about in newspaper and media is called CRISPR. And so this is gene editing technology that allows researchers to target specific stretches of genetic code and actually alter that genetic code in the DNA within them.
Que suelen incluir las terapias dirigidas o las terapias personalizadas, ¿no? Secuenciación genética, una determinación del orden del componente básico del ADN, secuenciación de próxima generación. En lugar de secuenciar todo el código genético del individuo desde cero cada vez, esta técnica secuenciará fragmentos del ADN, entonces pedacitos, ¿no? De un individuo, y luego usará algoritmos para comparar los resultados de una biblioteca de ADN para llenar los vacíos. Y también hay una tecnología CRISPR, la tecnología de edición de genes, que permite a los investigadores apuntar a tramos específicos del código genético, pedazos del código genético, y alterar el ADN dentro de ellos.
And so this slide up here may look a bit complicated. It basically summarizes the 18 known gene loci that we are aware of as of this past year. We can see the information on the chromosome, the location itself, the name of the gene, the inheritance pattern, right, whether something is autosomal dominant or recessive, and then the online Mendelian inheritance in man, which is this constantly updated catalog of human genes and genetic disorders and traits. So that's all the way on the right side, the OMIM. And what's the most important take-home message here is that genes actually only play a rather small role in the cases of Parkinson's. So only roughly 10%.
Los genes juegan un papel en el 10% de los casos. En la imagen, dónde se encuentra el gen, en qué cromosoma y la clase de genes, ¿no?
And what are several known genetic factors of Parkinson's disease? And so the most common cause of early onset PD are the known Parkin mutations. Then we have the CNCA mutations, also where we see a younger onset, but there is a known faster progression. GBA mutations, which our Weill Cornell group has become very interested in, is the most common of the currently known PD genetic mutations. And then there's LRRK2, fairly uncommon, but is the greatest known genetic contributor to Parkinson's disease.
¿Y cuáles son los varios factores genéticos conocidos de la enfermedad de Parkinson? Por ejemplo, hay mutaciones del Parkin. Es la causa más común de la enfermedad de Parkinson de inicio temprano. Mutaciones SNCA, por sus siglas en inglés, es comienzo precoz de la enfermedad de Parkinson con progresión rápida de la enfermedad, ¿no? Y mutaciones GBA, la más común de las mutaciones genéticas de la enfermedad de Parkinson actualmente conocida. Las mutaciones LRRK2 es poco común, pero es el mayor contribuyente genético conocido a la enfermedad de Parkinson.
And this is one of my favorite bits of precision medicine, the biological component. So we know the pathological process of Parkinson's disease. We're fairly strongly hypothesizing that this begins in the nervous system years before somebody's actually diagnosed. So the microbial imbalance of the gut microbiome has already been demonstrated in Parkinson's disease. So we know the science behind this. And changes may cause loss of dopamine cells when changes in the gut cause loss of neurons to release neurotoxins into the systemic circulation.
¿Y cuáles son los componentes biológicos de la medicina de precisión? El proceso patológico de la enfermedad de Parkinson puede comenzar en el sistema nervioso años antes del diagnóstico, ¿no? Años atrás. Se ha demostrado que un desequilibrio en el microbioma intestinal en la enfermedad de Parkinson y los cambios pueden causar la pérdida de células de dopamina cuando los cambios en el intestino provocan la pérdida de neuronas para liberar neurotoxinas en la circulación sistémica.
So this results in proliferation of alpha-synuclein pathology. Remember, alpha-synuclein is that protein we mentioned earlier. From gut to brain via the vagus nerve. But in the vagus nerve is actually the 10th cranial nerve that interfaces with control of the heart, lungs, and the digestive tract. So this may trigger both an inflammatory and an autoimmune response. Now, if scientists can categorize patterns of gut microbiome, a clinical phenotype may be developed. So this could give us a tremendous amount of information. So thus the gut microbiome has emerged as a potential target for intervention of disease prevention and also modification.
Esto da como resultado la proliferación de la patología de alfa-sinucleína, que es la proteína que hablamos anteriormente, del intestino al cerebro a través del nervio vago. Esto puede desencadenar una respuesta inflamatoria y autoinmune. Si los científicos pueden caracterizar patrones del microbioma intestinal, se puede desarrollar un fenotipo clínico y, por lo tanto, el microbioma intestinal se ha convertido en un objetivo potencial para la intervención y prevención y modificación de enfermedades.
All right, so now we're going to focus more on the social and environmental component of precision medicine. And this will include aspects like education, employment, family support, or family history, social support, friends, social media use, diet, exercise, mental health, smoking status, access to quality or accessible health care, access to medical insurance or coverage, access to telehealth, access to transportation, as well as whether or not a patient lives with someone or if the patient lives alone. So this is all important. It has determinants on health. So these are, you know, there is importance of the social and environmental determinants of health. And an example of this, right, can be when patients who live alone have a much higher chance of preventable hospital admissions than those who have family members at home. So if flagged prior to discharge, unnecessary readmissions can be prevented by taking steps such as follow-up calls and or visits from social workers or case managers. Next slide, please.
¿Cuáles son los componentes sociales ambientales de la medicina de precisión? Esto incluye aspectos sociales como la educación, el empleo, el apoyo familiar, historia familiar, apoyo social entre amigos, uso de redes sociales, dietas, ejercicio, salud mental y el uso del tabaco. Acceso a atención médica de calidad o atención accesible, acceso a seguro, cobertura médica, ¿no? Acceso a la telesalud, lo que estamos dando el día de hoy, acceso al transporte. Aparte de eso, ¿con quién vive un paciente? O si el paciente vive solo. Importancia de los determinantes sociales y ambientales de la salud es tener acceso a este tipo de información. Puede impulsar intervenciones que afecten la calidad de atención, como por ejemplo, los pacientes que viven solos tienen una probabilidad mucho mayor de ingresos hospitalarios que pueden ser prevenibles a aquellos que tienen familiares en casa, ¿no? Por lo tanto, si se marca antes del alta, de que den el paciente al alta, de alta, se puede prevenir readmisiones innecesarias tomando medidas como llamadas de seguimiento y visitas de trabajadores sociales o administradores de casos.
So some more factors that come into play are exposures that we experience every day. So for example, chemicals, lead, air and pollution, sun, pesticides, what is in the food we eat, as well as the neighborhoods that we live in, if we experience any natural disasters, any climate change, or any occupational hazards. Next slide, please.
Entonces, ¿cuál es el componente ambiental de la medicina de precisión? Cuando uno está expuesto a lo que experimentamos todos los días, como los químicos, el plomo, la contaminación del aire, el sol, plaguicidas y pesticidas, y que hay en nuestra comida, ¿no? En la comida que comemos de diario. Y aparte de eso, también en el barrio en que vivimos, los desastres naturales, cambios climáticos y los riesgos laborales.
So kind of to summarize, right, an overall lifestyle is very important to, you know, to Parkinson's disease patients. So while genetic factors, biology factors, social factors, and environmental factors are all part of precision medicine that better establish a person's profile. Lifestyle has a role as well. There's an interplay between genetic and lifestyle factors that influences gene expression. Next slide, please. All right, so when we're talking about the treatment of the disease, we should focus on exercise. Researchers have found that exercise training not only improves muscle strength and function, but also has these benefits. It reduces motor symptoms, so improving bradykinesia, so which we know are slowed movements, and any postural instability, and enhances the efficacy of levodopa therapy. It improves endurance, and improves gait disturbance, which is like walking issues, and improves cognitive function, and overall improves quality of life. Next slide, please.
Entonces, ¿cuál es uno de los tratamientos para la enfermedad de Parkinson? Son los ejercicios aeróbicos. Los investigadores han descubierto que aparte de mejorar su fuerza muscular y su función, el entrenamiento físico también tiene otros beneficios, como por ejemplo, reduce los síntomas motores, mejora la bradicinesia, los movimientos lentos y la inestabilidad postural, mejora la eficacia de la terapia con levodopa, mejora la resistencia, mejora las anomalías en la forma de caminar, problemas para caminar, y mejora la función cognitiva, mejora la calidad de vida en general, ¿no?
And we also can't talk about the treatment of the disease without talking about diet. So a particular diet that comes to mind is called the Mediterranean diet, which is focused on more vegetables and fats like olive oil, and includes smaller amounts of lean protein, including chicken or fish, which can be eaten at the end of the day if you're taking levodopa throughout the day. More fruits, nuts, grains, and beans, green vegetables, prunes for constipation, and drinking plenty of water. Next slide, please.
También otros tratamientos para la enfermedad, como la dieta. Un ejemplo de una dieta, la dieta mediterránea, con más verduras y grasas, como el aceite de oliva, pequeñas cantidades de proteína magra, incluyendo pollo o pescado, más frutas, nueces, granos y frijoles, tomar bastante agua, o también la ciruela pasa para la constipación.
All right, so what exactly are we doing at Cornell? So we currently have a gene therapy clinical trial focused on an experimental GBA PD treatment sponsored by Prevail Therapeutics. To enroll in this clinical trial, we have a feeder study that identifies patients with GBA mutations. So this feeder study is focused on GBA genotyping. This is the criteria that you need to have in order to enter this feeder study. You need to be from the ages 40 to 75 years old. The study period is a one-time visit, so about 30 to 45 minutes, that involves a blood sample collection. There is no medication requirement. However, you must have a Parkinson's disease diagnosis. You must be willing to provide a blood sample. You must be able to get to the clinic, so you must be, ambulatory in some way, and you have to be living within the community. Next slide.
Just gonna make a small announcement in Spanish. Esta parte de la presentación va a ser en inglés nada más.
All right, and moving on to the major clinical trial, it's a Prevail Therapeutics clinical trial that focuses on the safety and effects of PR001 in patients with Parkinson's disease with at least one GBA mutation. The study period is about 5 years. There is no medications requirement. However, there is some other requirements. For example, you must be between the ages of 40 to 75 years old. You must have a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease with a GBA1 mutation. And the protocol does involve some imaging and specimen collection. And a major component of the protocol is that there is a surgical procedure to administer the study drug P0001A or placebo. Next slide, please. So if you are interested in any of the precision medicine studies, feel free to contact myself or Natalie Helmers, the other presenter today, or any one of the study team. So we have 2 other research coordinators listed on the screen. Their names are Gabrielle Arrowback or Samantha Barkin. All right, next slide. So this is reaching the end of our presentation. We just want to thank you guys for participating in our seminar. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself or to type it into the chat feature.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start the poll function now.
Okay.
And if you could please answer the poll for today. And let me launch the poll. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or type it in chat. Si tienen preguntas, pueden escribir sus preguntas en la parte de chat, en la parte de abajo. I have one quick question. It says, I'm going to say it in English and then in Spanish. What are some foods that you recommend people to eat when somebody has Parkinson's disease? La pregunta es, ¿cuáles son los alimentos que usted recomienda que las personas coman cuando uno tiene la enfermedad de Parkinson?
Sure, I can go ahead and answer that question. So basically, we recommend brain healthy foods. Right? So what does brain healthy foods mean? In that previous slide that we showed, we mentioned the Mediterranean diet also, right? So between kind of those 2 concepts, basically encourage you avoiding processed foods, avoiding foods that are high in sugar. Remember, we know that there's an inflammatory process that's going on here. So foods that are really high in sugar can also encourage inflammation. You want to think about brain healthy foods like nuts, right? So walnuts, cashews. You want to think about root vegetables, and of course, things like berries, leafy greens, like green vegetables, fish, tuna, kind of avoiding red meats. I mean, you don't have to eliminate it completely from your diet, but not to have a diet that's primarily based on red meat is also recommended. Keep in mind, there isn't really officially a Parkinson's diet, but what we know, and this comes from natural history studies, that what's been observed in people who do well with Parkinson's are usually those who eat all those types of foods that I just mentioned.
En general, no hay una dieta clasificada como una dieta para la enfermedad de Parkinson, pero para comer comidas para el cerebro, como ejemplo, nueces, pescado, menos grasas, menos azúcar, especialmente porque el azúcar puede causar incrementos en la inflamación. También menos carne roja, como la carne de res o la carne de cerdo. Y en la presentación del día de hoy también hablamos sobre lo que es la dieta mediterránea y usar aceites como el aceite de oliva, el aguacate.
Any other questions or comments, thoughts, concerns, anything that maybe was a little confusing still as far as the information presented?
So I got a question about why do all these studies exclude people over 75? So I'm not sure if there's a specific reason, but in the protocols themselves, the age criteria is specified. And unfortunately, that is the age criteria provided for the subjects. And I could, safely assume that they exclude anyone over the age of 75 because that's when a lot of other things might start to happen. So to have like a subject that is willing to commit and have less issues come up, I think that's why they limit the age criteria to 40 to 70 to 75.
Yep, and just to add to that, that's a health disparity, right? An example of, a population subset that unfortunately is frequently omitted from clinical trials. Again, I'm not a principal investigator, right? So I'm not the one who's making the inclusion-exclusion criteria, but it would be interesting to ask those researchers and scientists who are doing it. And as Mesa said, unfortunately, right, we do categorize by age because of sort of the known health changes that occur. What's not so good about this, and this is really a big shout out to our older adults, right, that are really important and that we want to know the science and the research behind them. Lots of clinical drug trials are also, they tend to recruit people that are younger. So how do medications affect older adults? It might be different. So, again, if we think about like changes that do need to occur for the future, just from my own perspective, I would say we do need to make sure our older adults are included in future clinical trials. That's a gap. It's a big gap.
I have two questions. The first one, it says the best exercise should be aerobic. I'll say in Spanish. La pregunta es, el mejor ejercicio tiene que ser aeróbico.
Yep. So I can answer a part of that. Ideally, and there is research behind exercises. So there are groups who have actually looked at different types of exercises to see what is the best for Parkinson's. So aerobic exercises, right? So where you're really working the cardiovascular system, where you're really pushing through some limitations, have been seen to affect the brain and possibly help cognition. Inevitably, though, when we look at Tai Chi, when we look at boxing, when we look at dancing, those various exercises all have something to offer. So, from just even my own clinical experience working with a variety of patients who have their exercise preference, right? Not everybody loves dance, not everybody loves boxing, but if you can incorporate, a fair amount of exercise with some variety, with an aerobic component where you are physically challenging yourself, right? You're getting your heart rate up a little bit every day or every other day, or even if it's 3 times a week. That's a benefit. It's a benefit to the brain and it's a benefit to the cardiovascular system.
El ejercicio aeróbico, como por ejemplo, no nada más tiene que ser ejercicio aeróbico, puede ser cosas como bailar, puede ser tai chi, puede ser el boxeo. En el pasado estudios clínicos han presentado que ejercicios aeróbicos pueden ser muy buenos para lo que es la enfermedad de Parkinson. So the next question is, are people of any age exposed to develop Parkinson's disease? I'll say in Spanish, las personas pueden tener Parkinson en cualquier edad.
Right, so, the ages that are affected, we do have kind of a different range that statistics show. We talk about, right, older adults, right? So 65 and up, we have 50 and up. In some cases, statistics show that ages 45 and up can develop Parkinson's. We also have young onset. So there are cases known, where someone in their 30s might develop Parkinson's. It's not as common statistically, but it does exist.
It says, I understand why no tests or studies are performed on people over 75, but that excludes a lot of seniors.
I agree, it does. And that in the future will hopefully change.
I don't think we have any more questions. So.
Okay, I believe it looks like a lot of people did answer the poll. I don't know if the group can see it. I can see it on my screen. Certainly you probably can see it as well. So kind of nice. We have a lot from Manhattan. We have Brooklyn. We have Queens here today with us. What's interesting too, I see a mix. So we have those who have Parkinson's, but many people joined us today who are simply interested in the clinical trials. And this part is, again, for us as researchers and scientists, we are certainly interested about what worries people about, joining research. So, again, this could be food for thought for a whole other discussion down the line. So I guess if I may, I know it just upgraded again, so we did get a few more responses. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
You can leave it as this. I'll take care of it later.
You'll take care of it. Okay, so I'm just going to then stop sharing my screen here. Okay.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you, Maisa, for today. Muchas gracias a todos ustedes y nos vemos en la próxima presentación.
Thank you, everybody. Really, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to doing this again in the future. So happy end of September, happy fall season, and hope to see you all again at some point. Thank you, Mesa. Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you, guys. I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you on the next presentation, which should be sometime soon, maybe in the next couple of weeks. Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.